Welcome to the Inflation and Escalation tutorials for cost analysis, presented by the Office of the Secretary of Defense and the Cost Assessment Data Enterprise. I'm your host, Eric Laughlin. Welcome to the Inflation and Escalation tutorials. We are going to be exploring through this video and all the subsequent ones the differences between inflation and escalation and their uses in cost analysis. Each of these videos, which will be a short segment of 5 to 10 minutes, will try to introduce each topic, term, and concept sequentially, and they will be used in all subsequent analyses. So please go through the videos one at a time, and for those who are more advanced, feel free to start skipping videos. These videos are meant for the Department of Defense and cost analysis therein, but are applicable to cost analysis everywhere. Let's get started with an example. In 1958, the Secretary of Defense was Neil McElroy. Just a year before, the Soviets had launched Sputnik, and in 1958, the Department of Defense went under a great reorganization from the helm of President Eisenhower. Neil McElroy said in his 1958 annual address, "The cost of maintaining our armed forces at adequate strength to deter war has steadily increased in recent years. This upward trend is likely to continue in the years ahead. Increases have occurred in ship construction costs. World War II submarines cost less than $5 million, and the present nuclear submarines cost more than $50 million. The price of ballistic missile submarines is likely to reach $100 million. Note that Neil McElroy is showing great concern for the cost increases of defense purchases, here submarines. So we can chart out each of these submarine costs on a graph. So that's what we have here. On the x-axis, you'll see years. On the y-axis, you'll see unit cost in millions of dollars. In 1945, an attack submarine for World War II costs approximately $5 million. In 1954, 9 years later, the nuclear-powered USS Nautilus cost approximately $50 million. That was a 1,000% cost increase, or about 29% per year. In 1959, the nuclear-powered submarine was added to the capabilities of ballistic missile in the USS George Washington. That was 100% growth per total, from $50 to $100 million, representing about 15% per year. Now the question here is how much of the growth between these different types of submarines was due to the technical characteristics therein. For example, how much of the 1,000% cost increase between a World War II and a nuclear-powered submarine is due to the inclusion of new and better subsystems, such as nuclear propulsion. Similarly, what proportion of the 100% cost increase between the Nautilus and George Washington is due to the addition of ballistic missiles? The questions don't just end there. How much of this cost increase is due to the quantity orders? For example, in World War II, the United States purchased dozens of submarines in high-rate production. That means there was more productivity that was occurring in attack submarines of the World War II class. The USS Nautilus was the first nuclear-powered submarine of its type, and it represents a very different part in the production order relative to the $5 million quote for an attack submarine. Similarly, the USS George Washington was the first of its kind with ballistic missiles. So, of these cost increases, how much was due to technical characteristic changes, such as the addition of nuclear power and ballistic missiles? How much was due to lower production orders or fewer quantities produced and thus less productivity achieved, and how much was due to other sources. We may ask this again: what proportion of the price change is attributable to programmatic decisions? The government can decide what to buy, the quality or the technical characteristics of the programs, and how much to buy, the number of quantities of each system to be procured. Both of these choices will have effects on the unit costs. However, there are price changes that are independent of what to buy, the quality, and how much to buy, the quantity. These include economic effects, such as inflation. Inflation represents the devaluation of the dollar. The dollar is the unit of currency or money upon which all transactions are accounted. A decrease in the value of the dollar corresponds to an increase in the inflation rate. How much of the cost increase of the attack submarines was due to the change in the value of the dollar, or inflation? And lastly, how much of that cost increase is due to escalation, or changes in specific market prices, while inflation measures the value of the dollar, which is in practice computed using the weighted average across all goods and services transacted in the economy. Escalation only measures price changes for certain goods or services. How much of the price increase is due to, say, wage increases for shipyard workers, or material increases for the price of steel? Whenever performing cost analysis, it is important to understand the underlying relationships between costs, technical characteristics, and quantity. In order to derive correct relationships, one must also account for the underlying economic effects that affect costs but are not a function of what to buy or how much to buy, namely inflation and escalation. These two concepts are different in form and should be treated differently in cost analysis. The next several videos will go over how inflation and escalation should be treated when the cost analyst encounters certain circumstances. That is all for today. Thank you.